Okay, welcome back, everyone, to another great episode of The Human Role. So, as we are in the month of October, we have started talking a little bit more about AI. Every season, there's an episode with AI, but if you paid attention to the last episode, you saw the webinar that I co hosted with some heavy AI experts. And now I have a really special guest to continue that conversation into the new wave of hiring. And we have the CEO of BrightHire. So, BrightHire is an AI powered co-pilot, I would say, to help assist a lot of the hiring trends. And so we do have Ben Sesser with us. Super excited to have him and all of his extreme experience when it comes to HR tech. And I'm really going to take a deep dive into what brought him to start BrightHire and like their features and all their trends that they have within their system. It's really going to be good for our HR population to pay attention to. So welcome, Ben. Really excited to have you. And for anyone in my network who does not know who you are at all, I know there's a lot of people that do. There's probably going to be some that this is going to be new to. So I'd like to just give you the floor first and kind of go through your background and kind of what led you into BrightHire here today before we get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on. As you mentioned, the co-founder and CEO of BrightHire. BrightHire has been around for 5 years. A lot of folks say that they fall into recruiting or HR, which is true. But yeah, my background in this space goes back more time than I would care to admit, back to actually education. So I was a labor relations major, ended up working at a company that did HR research and best practices for a lot of really large enterprises, and kind of just fell in love with the people side of business, and also very passionate about how folks find opportunities, whether that be through education and careers. And so I did that, and then I got into tech. I've been in tech for about 14 years, and before BrightHire, I was the COO of a venture-backed company. And one of a couple of my jobs in that role were running people and talent and finance. And in that role, realized that as we grew from a couple dozen people to in the hundreds, and I sort of signed every offer letter, approved every headcount, interviewed every candidate. Two things struck me. One was that it was very evident that people were the most important ingredient for our organization's success, and that hiring was very practically how we built our team over and over and over again. And then secondly, hiring was the biggest way that we allocated our capital. Every hiring makes a huge investment, and it felt like this is really important, and many companies struggle with it because it's a process that's very hard, run by volunteers, and they don't do it very frequently, which generally isn't a recipe for high performance and success. And we kind of wondered, well, maybe technology can make people and teams more successful at hiring, and by extension, help give candidates the experience that they deserve. So that's kind of the long arc story of how we got to BrightHire, and it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, look, from finance to people ops, right? That's definitely two different ends of the spectrums. But you found your way here, and now look, you've identified a gap, right? That's been clear in our industry, and are working to solve that, which is great. So that helps kind of paint the picture to everyone, the inspiration that led you here today. I know a lot of us appreciate it, especially hearing this from a finance person, right? Originally, right? Because it's really hard to get some of those C-suite executive CFOs to really understand, everything when they're just looking at numbers. So those have been some tough crowds for us to deal with, but let's get into BrightHire, because now that you've explained your journey, BrightHire seems to definitely be helping to solve a lot of topics that we need, trends within the hiring space, right? If we focus on talent acquisition. So I'd like to just kind of get your insight on how BrightHire has really evolved since you've been in the business for about 5 years now, how it's really evolved to kind of help change the hiring trends, because it's changing every day, right? With COVID and remote work and so forth. So I want to get your insight there.
Our overall mission is to give everyone the hiring experience they deserve. And the way that we started from day one was, there's finding candidates, and then what happens? Then a bunch of people talk to each other and make decisions, and that's every single outcome in hiring. And I felt like that was a pretty important part to get right. So very specifically like interviews and hiring decisions. And so none of that's changed. That's still our mission. And we still feel like that's a really important part of the hiring process. We started with, well, how do we make every interview better and inform every decision with much better objective information? And so the idea was quite simple. It was, running an interview is really hard. So what might make it easier is if you take away the cognitive load of having to remember everything someone tells you because you're writing it all down like a stenographer. Can you make hiring decisions better if they're not based on, sort of people's feelings, recollections, and, sort of pen and paper notes? So we recorded the interviews, we transcribed them. That was how we got started. And we did some other things. as well, but just to, kind of improve the consistency of interviews. And over time, as our technology, as we've been building for 5 years and technology's evolved in terms of AI, today we're really an end-to-end hiring excellence platform that's powered by AI. So if you think about from the moment you're like, we need to hire for a role, we have a need, and you're trying to figure out like, what does that mean? What are the skills and competencies and traits that are really important for this role? How do I express this to candidates in the market as a job description? How do I create an assessment plan around that? How do I run great interviews? How do I make great hiring decisions, calibrate along the way, and then learn, gather data that allows us to really understand our hiring process in a way that we never knew before and use that to kind of continuously get better. That's really the scope of what we do now. So it's just broader and deeper and really infused by AI, but the gist is still the same. We want to give everyone the hiring experience they deserve, and we do that primarily by focusing on the interview process.
Yeah, that's perfect. Look, I always see like through my LinkedIn feed is everyone is looking for jobs and being ghosted, and recruiters are posting they've got 200 applicants and they're claiming not to use AI, but trying to, just use a human themselves. It's like we need to keep this as a tool, right? Because it can be super helpful. But also, as we touched on, like the interview piece. So between remote work and hybrid, so 2019, BrightHire was founded, but curious on, into 2020, how that changed. It seems like you were like ahead of the game, like COVID maybe only enhanced that, but curious on how you guys continue to push your business during that time.
Yeah, the nice way of looking at it is that we just, we could see around a corner and we were ahead of the curve. The other way to look at it is that, we were, out of our minds because we started our business before remote work and everyone, interviewing and hiring on Zoom. And we just felt like so passionate that technology could really make this part of the hiring process better, and how, kind of revolutionary that would be for everyone, inclusive of candidates, that we sort of ignored the fact that, not every hiring interview was happening on, remote and Zoom. We just sort of said, well, even if it was only the phone screen or the first and second interview, but not the on-site interviews, like that would still be really, really, really valuable. So we just felt really passionate about it. And then, of course, when the world, started hiring in a much more virtual fashion, yeah, that was a big, big accelerator for our business. And, we sort of were in a good, right place at the right time to some extent at that point.
Yeah, almost like you foresaw the future a little bit there. So,
Yeah.
you're super leading that. Yeah, no, it's super cool with that piece. And then, so definitely, like I've seen a lot of your videos. So to my population that has not, I'll make sure to connect you all with Ben through this post, but then also make sure to post a link for BrightHire yourself, so you can either look through the website, go get the demo, because this is going to be super, super helpful, especially if you are hiring within your company. Exactly what Ben talks about within his post is that BrightHire can help identify trends. So specifically what he's mentioning now, help you get ahead of your competition as well. And maybe even identify like gaps within your own company that you may or may not realize. So curious, Ben, like what additional features do you think BrightHire has that are definitely valuable to recruiting and hiring managers as they're going through like a candidate experience?
I'll start with hiring managers. So for a hiring manager, hiring is a big deal. You're adding to your team. Hiring is hard. People are not these black and white, and neither are roles, right? It's two things that have a lot of gray that you're trying to create alignment. And so we want to make hiring managers more confident that they're going to make the right hires. And so the way we do that is by giving them much, much better objective evidence that they can go back to make their decisions. And the way that we do that is we capture the interviews, right? Not just their interview, but the interview that their interviewers do on their behalf, right? At the end of the day, as a hiring manager, you have a bunch of other folks who are doing a job on your behalf to, talk to great candidates and learn about them and evaluate whether they're going to be a great fit. And then, very often what you get back is a couple of sentences of a summary and like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, which is really hard, right? It makes hiring managers self-conscious and lack confidence about, ultimately these really important decisions that they make. And so by giving hiring managers, kind of incredibly more high fidelity information, like the actual detailed notes from every interview automatically and highlights of the candidates so that they can take an interviewer's feedback and combine it with like the actual candidate's qualifications in their own words to triangulate that perspective, it puts them in a much more confident position to feel like they're going to make the right hire and put the right, individual on their team. So that's, for hiring managers, it's a huge, huge value add just from a confidence perspective. We also save them a bunch of time, which is really nice by doing things like making it automatic to write interview notes and, submit feedback in a click and do a bunch of other things that just like makes their life easier. And then for recruiters, yeah, I mean, it's a bunch, right? So day in and day out, recruiters are having conversation after conversation after conversation. So one is just a quality of life. There's just a huge quality of life improvement when, your notes are taken for you, and it's just a lot. It's like it's just an easier way to go through your day when you can talk to somebody and have a natural conversation, not be worried about writing everything they say down and forgetting it. So that's like one thing. So it's like quality of life and time savings is definitely there, but it also puts recruiters in a position to be a real consultant to their hiring teams, because not only they have visibility and shared context, right? It's hard to be a consultant to someone when you can't see the same thing as them. But when, a recruiter can now talk to a hiring manager about a candidate and they can look at the same evidence from that candidate and talk about, well, why do you think this person would be a great fit? And what are your questions? And let's talk about them. And let's be really objective about it. That puts a recruiter in a really cool position to advise and really have visibility into what's happening with their candidates. Because ultimately a recruiter wants to, help their teams make the right hires, give a candidate great experience. And you can do that so much better when you have visibility and you can really collaborate really effectively with your hiring teams. And then lastly, it helps recruiters manage, candidates and to make sure they get a great experience, right? It's really hard to keep track if you're a recruiter of an enormous number of candidates that you might be talking to. And so when you can go back and never forget a detail and remember the follow-ups and we can automate some of that with some alerts and things that are really useful. It just helps them ensure that every candidate has a great experience in a way that's much more scalable.
Yeah, so absolutely. Because look how many times at least in my career, there are some companies, of course, that have their own recruitment team, but then a lot of times HR is the recruiter, at least a part of that process between being the liaison between the recruitment team and the hiring manager and trying to understand that. So I'm sure there's plenty of times in history where someone has been writing something down and might have missed something that the candidate has said, right? And so that could also be an issue if that was a big qualification for the role. So this is great. And then how many times does someone really go and type up every single thing after the fact, right? Something is definitely going to get missed or shortened. Yeah. So like we said, so this is such like a great tool, and it's really fascinating to see just kind of how the world is evolving and how people like yourself are ensuring that these potential like gaps are being closed as much as possible. Let's get into client testimonials. So I wanted to ask you a little bit if you can, share and elaborate some more on your clients and their success stories on how your company has helped them evolve in this space.
So we serve a pretty big range of companies from like maybe on the SMB or the smaller company side to 180,000 employee company that's hiring tens of thousands of people a year. So it's a pretty big range across industries. But the common denominator is they want to be great at hiring and do a good job, both for their candidates and for their organization. And so ultimately, like the value propositions for our product, very high level for them are, this is going to help us run a much more excellent interview and hiring process. So, we will ultimately make better hires that, select people that are going to be a great fit for the organization and for the roles. Secondly, we're going to help save everyone much time and just make that streamline the process, right? Hiring process is a lot of work for a lot of people in an organization. And so if you can streamline it and make it more efficient, that's really beneficial because time is money and, everyone is very busy. So it's great to be able to use some automation to automate people's interview notes and do things like that just, make life easier for everyone. And then ultimately, the last one is candidate experience and, and equity. It's like, we want to do right by our candidates. What does that mean? That means give them a fair and objective process where they're evaluated on their merits, not our memories, make the process really more efficient for them and streamline, and ultimately ensure that we're making, objective decisions based on their own words. And so that's kind of the third thing that really matters. And yeah, we've quantitatively, we did actually a big study last year across a couple dozen of our clients, and it represented about 25,000 candidates in total. And, the data speaks, we were basically measuring like, what's the impact of BrightHire? You were hiring before for certain roles and you were hiring with BrightHire for the same roles after. What happened? And we saw things like 28% more feedback was submitted for candidates. It was both submitted more frequently and faster, about 30% faster. So that was like thing one, which is both quality and efficiency. We also saw there was almost a 20% reduction in candidates withdrawing from their process. So candidate drop off. So that speaks to candidate experience. Why? Because it's a more thoughtful process that's more efficient. So less candidates pull out of the process and say, this isn't for me. So there was just a lot of quantitative data to back up things that we sort of already, knew and had heard from our clients, but at scale.
That's perfect because I definitely think along the way, naturally, balls are dropped, right? And so this is definitely really helpful for the team. I'm sure it's a big stress reliever for the recruitment team, the HR team. But then also, as you mentioned, I've said several times in past episodes, this is now turning into an employee market versus an employer market, right? Where employees are saying this is what they want and they're really wanting a lot of flexibility, especially with their work schedule. And so I think having your system really help your recruitment team and really just making sure all things are documented, noted, and you're putting the right person in the seat versus just throwing someone in the seat and just hoping it's going to work. The recruitment process and hiring process is tough. And getting that right candidate and having that right candidate stay is really a big deal because that's just, I'm sure there's also got to be some documentation of like ROI that your company has helped, businesses save right along the way when it comes to that. So I wanted to also, before we close out today, really get your insight on the AI world in the HCM space. So there was a lot of questions, a webinar that I co-hosted recently, some HR people asking, how many jobs is AI going to take? And, how do we know if a candidate is using, AI to answer the questions virtually? Some of that stuff is just inevitable, right? We can't really, it's like, hey, they lie and then they get in there and they can't do the job. It's like one of those things. But there's definitely at this point, I think it's pretty clear that there are going to be some jobs, right, that may potentially go away or maybe change. And I've been encouraging everyone over the last year or so to really become more strategic. So the mundane tasks that you're probably used to doing every day, use AI as a specific tool to kind of better help enhance that. Because if your company is not using AI, you're definitely far behind. You got to just start accepting it and using it. So really curious on your insight, Ben, since I look at you as like a heavy expert, right, on the AI space. How do you continue to see the future evolving and any additional insight on, jobs or interviewing stuff that you can provide from like the AI space?
There's a lot there. Maybe I'll start I'll start broad, and then maybe if it's helpful, I can try to get more narrow into the kind of the HR and the recruiting space. I mean, very broadly, the AI that you're using today, if you are, is the worst AI you will ever use again in your entire life, probably by a long shot. So I think that's like important to keep in mind. If you've explored ChatGPT or Claude or Google, Gemini, first of all, it's very powerful and you can use it, to your point, to have lots of little life hacks and automate routine things and, save some time and it's great. And, we're a case in point of that, right? It's a lot of things that we do on our platform, but that's the tip of the iceberg, because the AI model, the AI itself is going to get much more powerful and useful in many respects. It's going to become less expensive to build. And so what that's going to mean is it's going to be applied to more things. And I think to your point, it's going to be applied first and most directly to things that can be automated, things that are routinized and simpler. Although sometimes ChatGPT feels like, you're having a conversation with a person. It's not, it's a model and, it's a little bit of like a parlor trick, but it is really good for synthesizing things and automating things and doing those sorts. And you should assume that most of those sorts of tasks are going to get automated in the very near future, because that's really the case. It is not, going to replicate, the creativity and the dynamism in your mind and the human mind. And for a lot of things, again, even though sometimes it seems like it feels like it's, like that, that's not actually what's going on, but it is going to become much more powerful very quickly. And so it's really definitely very important to lean into it. And to kind of, make it part of your toolkit, because I think you'll see a difference between people who are very comfortable leaning into AI and incorporating it in their work and people that aren't. Like, it's just in terms of productivity. You are ultimately going to be in the workplace with a lot of folks, as we are today, and some are going to be able to make themselves much, much more productive than others based on their willingness to lean into AI. And that's actually pretty important. So I think you're going to want to be in that group that's making themselves 3, 4, 5 times more productive, because that's going to be really valuable for organizations that you're interested in working at.
Absolutely. Yeah. All good stuff. All great insight. So if you are not following Ben or BrightHire on LinkedIn, please do so. Look at their site. Definitely reach out if you have any questions specifically. You can absolutely, of course, request a demo. I would say try to get this within your company, even if you can't budget it in this year, because we're closing the year out now, but maybe try to like bucket it in for next year. So it's definitely going to be beneficial. And obviously it will take probably a good year or so to kind of start seeing the enhancements of it, but definitely is going to be beneficial from that end. So thank you so much, Ben, for joining us today. Really, I'm happy to have you on. Looking forward to the future updates. So I'm going to reshare all those updates on my page as Ben puts out more clippets and snippets of the enhancements of BrightHire, and hopefully, future episode, maybe at some point next year, we can have you on again and get some more updates from that end as well.
I love that.
Coming up in another couple of weeks, another great episode. I'll save that for when we launch and post it out. But thank you all so much for joining again. See you soon. Bye.